Hi there, this is Linda and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm putting together my Project Life spread for July 13th through July 19th, 2026, and I'm working with products from my stash. Let's go ahead and dive right in. Okay, so this was kind of a boring nothing week. I didn't take a lot of photos, and sometimes that happens. The main thing that happened this week was we had our ceiling repaired after we had some plumbing issues in the previous week. I think it was the previous week, maybe it was 2 weeks before. So I don't have a ton of interesting photos. I had some photos of pumpkin and photos of the repairs, and that's it. I really just didn't take a lot of photos. I have some journaling cards. So what I decided was I don't have a kit to use for this spread. I want to do some stash busting. So I went through my stash of card sets. So especially in the Stories by the Month kits, there are these sets of cards that kind of go together. And what I decided that I wanted to do was find a way to use them all in one spread. So I have these cards here. And there's also this vellum one, which I think might be good for like a filler. And then I have my photos. So I have some random pumpkin ones. These are from the ceiling repairs that we had done. And then this was related. And then let's see, we've got pumpkin here. And then, so I need just a couple of things to add in, a title card and a filler card. And then what I wanted to do was just use these for some journaling. So I made kind of a list of my stories for this week. And I thought, so this one could be about the ceiling repairs. And I definitely don't have enough to fill this entire journaling card. So I think I'm going to do some large stamped titles. So then I try to think of what else I had. And then these, I decided I could do like home and work stories. And then I thought I could do I started some new meds for my headaches and it was a disaster. So I could do that story. My boyfriend had his friend visit, so I could do that story. And then the smoke outside from the fires in Canada, I thought could be a story as well. So I'm thinking I'm going to do some large stamping and journaling on these. I need to pick out some cards for these. I'm probably, because my photos are so boring, I'm probably going to add more embellishments on them and maybe some labels to identify what's going on in these photos. And yeah, I think that that's good for a starting place. So what I'm going to do is actually maybe I should figure these out. So let me go over to my stash. So I'm going to go through the ones that are home related for filler cards, because we have all these home repairs. So I'm just going to look at these and see if there's anything that kind of goes with, like that might be cute. So I'm not actually loving any of those, so I'm going to find another category of cards to go through. Okay, so these are my specific themed ones, which means they don't fit any of my other categories, but they are specific to a story. So these are the ones where I like to try to use them as much as possible. So I'm going to just go through these and see if any of them might work for this spread. I think that those are some good choices. I liked this one, even though the sentiment really doesn't mean anything for this specific story. I like it because I like the colors with these colors. And same with this one. And I thought that this was kind of good for this repair where it kind of came out looking way better than it looked before. So not that the ceiling looked bad, but just having everything freshened up, looking perfect was great. So I think that this is a good starting place. What I'm going to do now is put you guys on voiceover, pick out an alpha and start my stamping, and then kind of see where I go from there. Okay, so I'm working on putting together the spread, and this one's going to come together really quickly. The most time-consuming part is going to be the stamping and the journaling. I actually have quite a bit to write this week. I had a lot more stories than things that had photos, and you'll see that in the final spread once I have all of my journaling completed. It worked really well with the cards that I'm using this week because these scalloped edge cards really gave you space for a lot of journaling. It was a perfect set for me to use during this week. You'll see how I use that purple one as a filler card. So if you wanted to use this set but didn't have so much to write, then you could definitely do something like that on some of the other cards. You could also print a photo and crop it to fit inside the scalloped edges. I think it'd be a little difficult to fussy cut around that shape, but you could do a rectangle that fits in there and has just kind of like those scalloped edges as a white border. And I think that that would look super cute as well. Right now I'm looking at my everyday carry journal and my writing down on a sticky note kind of notes to figure out what stories I want to go where on these cards. My plan is to do 4 larger specific stories. So those will be the 3 journaling cards on the left-hand side and the large one at the top of the right-hand side. And then I will do bullet point lists of journaling in that card, the 4x6 card that has the 2 blue rectangles, because that will give me the ability to kind of break those stories out into bullet points under 2 separate headings. So most of the time in my Project Life spread, I do have a bullet point list card that includes stories from the week that are basically what I call micro stories, something that you can tell in one sentence that doesn't need its own card. And it usually doesn't have a photo that goes along with it, but just something that you want to have recognized in your spread as something that happened, right? So I do those in a bullet point list, and that's kind of my favorite part of Project Life, the fact that it's capturing all of these tiny details that you don't ordinarily see. In this week, I am doing that in 2 separate lists. One is going to be titled Work, and one is going to be titled Rest, and those are going to be I'm just going to break apart my bullet point list of stories based on which category they fit in. My other stories, my larger stories this week, are going to be specific ones that I just figured out would have a little bit more to say. And I did struggle a little bit on selecting which stories I wanted to tell in these larger cards. The 4x6 card is about our ceiling repairs, which was definitely one of the biggest things that happened this week. If you saw last week's spread, we had a plumbing issue, or maybe it was even the week before. Honestly, I think it was like the week before or 2 weeks before. It was a few weeks ago. We had a plumbing issue where we had a leak from our upstairs shower, and to fix it, they had to cut a hole in the ceiling. And with that hole, they fixed the plumbing, but then we had this kind of like square cut hole out of our ceiling in the living room. So we had to have someone come and patch it, and he came this week. Thankfully, we had a guy that does painting and drywall repairs because we recently had him paint our house. So he was able to easily squeeze us in and come and fix this. And he did a few other minor repairs for us as well. If you are in my area in the capital region in New York and you are looking for someone that does paint and drywall, I highly recommend him. So let me know and I will send you his contact information because he is the best. So that card is going to be that large 4x6 one. But on the other side, I wasn't sure exactly what to journal about. So I just thought about the bigger themes this week. So one of the themes was the world is on fire, is what I wrote. And there were some wildfires happening in Canada this week. I try to incorporate the world news in my project life. I don't do it as much as I should. Unfortunately, I get burnt out by listening or reading the news. And I also have so much going on in my life. I feel like I don't pay as much attention to it as I should. But I do like capturing those details and kind of having them as a backdrop for my everyday stories, because it provides more context for what's going on at this point in the world, in addition to in my life. I specifically wanted to focus on this story because of the wildfires in Canada. Our air quality was beyond usable. It was bonkers how bad it was. And there was at least 2 days where there was just this like eerie haze, and you couldn't really breathe very well if you went outside. You couldn't see very far, and it was just kind of creepy looking. So I wanted to document that. The other 2 journaling cards I'm going to end up doing off camera. But one of them was my boyfriend had some plans for the weekend where he went away with a friend, and then the friend came over. So I just journaled about how that impacted me from my perspective, because Project Life is really my project, not his. He shows up in my album to the extent he is a part of my story. The same for my daughter or any of my friends or anyone else in my life. They show up in my Project Life album to the extent they are a character in my story. But Project Life for me is my album and my story. The last card says new med, and this week I did start a new medication to try to prevent headaches. If you've been following me for a while, you know I've been battling severe migraines, and I've been going to a headache clinic to try to treat those. And so they had me try a new medication this week to try to reduce the number of headaches I got. And I don't know if it worked for that, but I had so many bad side effects. It was awful. So I journaled about that on that card, and I'm going to do that one off camera as well. So here I'm working on my bullet point list. I'm using a zig dot marker to make a bullet point, and then I'm just using my pen. This is a Uniball 1.38, and it's the one with the chunky barrel. They make one with a non-chunky barrel, but I feel like my handwriting looks better with the chunky barrel one for some reason, and it doesn't feel like it writes the same. I know it does. I know it's the same because the inserts, like you can replace the ink and you can replace both of them, but for whatever reason, it looks different from the chunky pen. I think it must have to do with the pressure that you write when you are gripping a shorter, chunkier pen barrel, but I honestly don't know. So I will link that in the description box below if you're interested in this pen. It is my current go-to gel pen. And I added a few little kind of like carrot signs on top of all of those bullet points just to add a little bit extra detail. I pulled over these label stickers from Kelly Perky that were in my stash, and I pulled out some of my chipboard. So I have chipboard organization, which I have shared in a separate video in my drawers underneath my desk. I will link in the description box below that video if you are interested in learning more about how I organize my chipboard. But I pulled out the tray that is for like home. So I have one that is themed like home, tired, rest, those types of sentiments. And I pulled that one out because I felt like that was really the sentiment for this week. And I used a couple of them on the spread, including that one that I put on that filler card, which was one of the scalloped cards. And I really like how that came out. I pulled over these label stickers from Kelly Perky because I wanted to add in some journaling on top of some of these photos for a few reasons. One, I felt like these photos of the ceiling were very boring looking, or this one of the windowsill. They were just boring being in the pockets. Unfortunately, I didn't really take many other photos this week, so this ended up being kind of what I needed to fill my pockets with, but it was also the story that I wanted to tell. They weren't aesthetic looking photos. So to kind of make them a little bit better, I wanted to add something on top of them. Adding the label also allowed me to add a little bit more of the story and kind of explain what was in that photo. And then I'm going to later pull some puffy stickers from my stash to add a little bit more on top of those. I pulled these label stickers because I'm trying to stay in that same color scheme and pick things that coordinate with those scalloped cards. And I think that that works pretty well across the spread. I don't know if these are like, I don't know, they're like bright pastels, if that makes sense, for this color scheme, but I'm just picking and choosing products that are going to continue coordinating with that. I went over to my stash and selected 3 word phrase strip sheets that followed that same color scheme, and I decided to stack a few of them on some of the photos of pumpkin in this spread. I had 3 photos that I didn't include a chipboard or a label on, and so I'm just going to stack 3 word phrase strips on each of those. That's just bringing a little bit more color to the spread and a little bit more interest because, like I said, the photos this week were a little bit boring. There wasn't a lot going on this week because I had a lot going on towards the later part of the month, and we had a lot of home stuff this month. So I was very stressed. I had a lot going on at work, and I just needed some quiet time. And I'm happy that I did because at the very end of July, I went to Stationery Fest, which was so exhausting, but so much fun. And so I'm happy that I took the time to rest earlier in the month. And when you flip back through my Project Life albums, you can definitely see those phases when I have busy weeks and then I have quieter weeks, and I love seeing them all together. I do have a flip through of the first half of 2026 Project Life, which is completed now, and I will link that in the description box below for you if you are interested in seeing that. But for now, I'm just going to continue working on this, and you can see process videos of each of my spreads. But I do think that it is nice to have that flip through of the entire album because you definitely see something different when you see them all together like that. I decided to pull over some washi tape, and I kind of spilled it everywhere because that ceiling repair card, the journaling didn't go all the way to the bottom, and I felt like it needed something. So I found this washi tape that I have that is just like this little, it's a very thin washi with colored squares on it. They look kind of watercolored, but I felt like it went with all the fun colors in this spread. And I just added that as a border across the bottom of that card. And I do actually end up doing that on a couple of the other cards as well. You won't see that, but when I do the new med and weekend plan journaling later after I finish the filming, I added that washi tape across the bottom of those ones as well, which helps balance it across the spread. I also added a chipboard little house there. I think that was from maybe December Daily, but it's super cute and I liked it because it just kind of balanced the fact that that title wasn't perfectly centered, and because these are stories about my home, it worked really well to have that there. These 2 cards I need to tape together on the back because they are going into a 4x6 pocket. And when I use these page protectors, I do get questions about like, how do I select which page protector I'm using? And sometimes I base it on what I think I have in terms of horizontal photos, vertical photos, or specific cards I know I want to use. But mostly I just kind of pick one and stick with it. And if it turns out that I don't need that many 4x6 pockets, I just put 3x4 things in the pockets. I tend to use way more 3x4 pockets. I probably could get away with just doing these 3x4 pockets only ones, but I like mixing it up. Here's a look at that completed spread. Thank you guys so much for being here. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them down below. And as always, I hope to see you guys all in the next one. Bye.